No one expected this. For decades, Canada had been seen as a quiet partner, a reliable supplier of oil and gas to the United States. The pipelines flowed south without interruption, the crude was refined in U.S. facilities, and Washington never questioned the arrangement. But all of that changed in a matter of weeks. Without a single shot fired or speech declared, Canada made a move that has shaken the foundations of North American energy politics, and left the White House scrambling for answers. At the center of the storm is Canada's unexpected decision to bypass U.S. pipelines altogether. A new route, direct to Asia, has opened. The first shipment of liquefied natural gas, worth over 40 billion Canadian dollars, set sail from the Pacific port of Kitimat, bound for South Korea. Not 1 inch of American pipeline was used. It was Canada's first ever independent LNG export, and it sent a very loud signal. The days of dependence are over. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't just approve the project, he pushed it forward with national urgency. The East-West pipeline is now designated as essential infrastructure. That classification alone slashes approval timelines from years to months. The implications are vast. Nearly all Canadian oil and gas, 97%, still flows south to U.S. markets. But now, Carney has flipped the first valve to redirect that stream. If Ottawa closes the taps, Washington is left with a question it never thought it would ask: who will fuel America? The U.S. has long taken Canadian energy for granted. But this new export path changes everything. Canada's gas now reaches Northeast Asia in just 10 days, half the time it takes for U.S. shipments through the Panama Canal. Every day saved means tariffs are dodged, margins improve, and Canadian gas undercuts U.S. prices in critical markets like Tokyo and Seoul. The shift isn't just economic, it's geopolitical. Canada's largest private investment in history, the LNG Canada project, is now operational. The numbers are staggering: 14 million tons per year, with support from a global consortium including Shell, Petronas, Mitsubishi, and Sinopec. Train 1 is active. Train 2 is on the way. Full capacity is expected within months. This isn't speculation, it's strategy. The real shock came when Carney unveiled plans for a second pipeline, from Alberta straight to the Pacific, avoiding the U.S. entirely. This project is not just likely, it's imminent. Parliament passed new legislation to fast-track energy infrastructure, removing inter-provincial barriers and smoothing federal oversight. Indigenous concerns, which had previously stalled pipeline expansion, have been addressed in advance through benefit agreements and community development funds. Carney is moving faster and more decisively than any Canadian leader in recent memory. The consequences for the U.S. are immediate and painful. Refineries in Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia rely on Canadian crude. If that oil is rerouted to the Pacific, those facilities will be forced to seek costlier Middle Eastern grades. That means higher prices at the pump. A 10% rise in fuel costs could follow overnight. For the average American family, that's an extra $5 to $8 per tank. Multiply that across millions of cars, and the economic ripple is impossible to ignore. President Trump, never one to back down from a fight, responded the only way he knows how: tariffs. He threatened 25%, then 35%, and even 200% duties on Canadian energy and pharmaceuticals. But the markets didn't blink. Each time he tweeted, Canadian oil prices dipped just enough to keep U.S. buyers interested. The tactic worked. Carney is using oil as leverage, twisting the supply valve with political precision. And it doesn't stop there. Another LNG hub is being planned in Prince Rupert, even closer to Asia. Transit time would drop to just 8 days. The U.S. can't compete with that. Its pipelines are choked with lawsuits. Keystone XL is still stalled. The Constitution Pipeline is cancelled. Even the Mountain Valley Pipeline faces legal hurdles. America has the oil, but no way to move it. Canada, meanwhile, is building new infrastructure at record speed. While Washington argues, Ottawa acts. The energy map of North America is being redrawn in real time. The Gulf Coast is no longer the continent's fuel depot, Vancouver is. Every drop of oil that used to head south can now be loaded onto tankers bound for Asia, Latin America, or Europe. The strategic shift is irreversible. For American consumers, the impact is more than numbers on a spreadsheet. It's everyday life. Higher gasoline prices, rising food delivery costs, and more expensive clothing shipments are just the beginning. Rural families who depend on driving for everything, from school runs to grocery shopping, will feel the squeeze. Trucking companies will pass on higher fuel costs to businesses, who will then pass them on to customers. And still, the White House has no clear answer. It can't force Canada to keep supplying cheap oil. It can't compete on LNG transit times. And it can't build new pipelines without getting tangled in its own legal system. The result is a rare moment in modern geopolitics. America has lost leverage. Ottawa holds the cards. And Carney is playing them with ruthless efficiency. The August 1st deadline for pipeline negotiations wasn't chosen at random. It aligns with the final phase of construction. Once the last weld is made, there's no turning back. The pipeline will carry crude from Alberta to the Pacific Ocean, bypassing the U.S. entirely. Every drop rerouted is a loss for American refineries, and a win for Canada's independence. This isn't just about oil or gas. It's about power. And the balance is shifting. Trump may rage on social media. He may promise tariffs, threats, and retaliation. But the ships keep sailing. The pipes keep filling. And Canada, once America's quiet neighbor, is now a global energy player, strategic, self-reliant, and unafraid to act in its own interest. The White House can delay. It can bluff. But unless it finds a way to rebuild trust, streamline infrastructure, and genuinely compete in global markets, it will be playing catch-up for years to come. This is more than a political maneuver. It's a structural transformation. The age of unchallenged U.S. energy dominance is over. Canada has stepped into the void, and the rest of the world is watching. While most eyes remained fixated on the immediate fallout, something deeper was taking shape beneath the surface. Canada's bold shift didn't just catch Washington off guard. It exposed a structural vulnerability the U.S. had long ignored. For decades, energy policy was treated as a domestic matter, dictated by internal consumption and shale booms. But now, for the first time, the U.S. finds itself outmaneuvered in its own backyard, not by an adversary, but by an ally. American companies are beginning to feel the strain. Refineries built around Canadian heavy crude aren't designed to process lighter grades from Texas. Retrofitting them will cost billions. Time is not on their side. And investors know it. Wall Street's reaction was swift. Energy stocks tied to Gulf Coast exports slumped, while Canadian energy firms surged. Markets, unlike governments, don't wait for permission. And then came the ripple effects. Mexico, watching closely, announced preliminary talks with Canada on a trilateral LNG corridor. The idea? Use Pacific ports in British Columbia to ship energy south, then re-export through Mexico's free trade agreements to countries like Brazil and Chile. The result would sideline U.S. ports entirely, cutting America out of its own hemisphere's energy flow. Europe took notice too. With Russian gas supplies permanently constrained, Brussels is exploring long-term contracts with Canada for both crude and LNG. Norway, once seen as Europe's fallback, simply cannot match the scale or reliability of Canadian exports. Suddenly, Canada isn't just America's neighbor, it's the world's backup plan. Inside the U.S., political tensions are rising. Governors from energy-heavy states, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, are demanding federal intervention. They warn of job losses, refinery slowdowns, and a potential collapse in regional economies. But Washington's hands are tied. Environmental lawsuits, permitting delays, and bipartisan gridlock have stalled every major infrastructure project in recent memory. The U.S. is stuck in regulatory quicksand, while Canada races ahead. Mark Carney's vision isn't just logistical. It's philosophical. For years, Canada was told it needed U.S. access to survive. Now it's proving it can thrive without it. And in doing so, it's inspiring others. Australia, long reliant on Chinese export routes, is studying Canada's westward model. Even Norway is considering secondary LNG facilities modeled on Kitimat's design. The energy world is realigning, and the U.S. is no longer at the center. Meanwhile, Trump's rhetoric grows louder, but less effective. His calls for tariffs, pipeline seizures, or even trade renegotiations are met with diplomatic silence. Ottawa doesn't flinch. Instead, it doubles down. A new wave of legislation is passed, this time fast-tracking battery mineral exports to Europe. Canada isn't just selling gas, it's becoming the backbone of the green transition. And America? It's watching its monopoly slip away. For the average citizen, the signs are subtle at first. A few more cents per gallon. A slightly higher electricity bill. But over time, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. School districts delay bus schedules due to diesel shortages. Farmers report rising fertilizer and transport costs. Airlines quietly raise fares, citing jet fuel constraints. What was once global positioning becomes personal inconvenience. And yet, the political class seems unprepared. Congress holds hearings. Think tanks publish reports. But no one offers a solution that can be implemented fast enough to stop the shift already underway. The U.S. is reacting, while others are building. And then, the unexpected happens. China enters the conversation. Through backchannels, Beijing approaches Ottawa with a bold proposal: long-term energy contracts in exchange for infrastructure financing and rare earth cooperation. For Canada, it's an opportunity to expand exports and modernize its grid. For China, it's a chance to diversify supply chains away from unstable regions. For the U.S., it's a nightmare. A Canadian-Chinese energy corridor would redraw the geopolitical map. Washington would face a future where its two biggest rivals, one economic, one ideological, no longer depend on its cooperation. The Pacific, once America's front porch, could become its blind spot. Diplomatic cables fly. Emergency meetings are held. But by the time Washington acts, the agreements are already in motion. Ottawa insists it's not abandoning its alliance, only pursuing its interests. The message is clear: friendship doesn't mean dependency. And so, the U.S. enters a new reality. A world where energy no longer guarantees influence. Where allies chart their own course. And where the infrastructure of the 20th century can't power the ambitions of the 21st. The shift didn't happen overnight. It wasn't violent. There were no sanctions, no wars, no treaties torn apart. Just pipelines, tankers, and quiet resolve.